Hello, I'm Krista West, and this is Avlea Folk Embroidery FlossTube number 2. First, I just want to say, oh my word, thank you. Thank you to everyone who has been emailing me and leaving me YouTube comments and messaging me through Instagram. I am just so excited that you're enjoying this information and that you're finding it of interest and that it's helping you in your stitching journey. That's why I do what I do. So it just makes me really excited. Today, I am going to be super excited, and I know I'm at a normally higher level of excitement than most people, but today I'm really excited because we're going to be talking about floral motifs in Mediterranean textiles. Today's going to be fun. It's going to be a little longer, but it's going to be really fun. Now, before I launch in, I want to cover a little bit of housekeeping. First, because now I have to say all this stuff at the beginning and the end of the videos. First is I am Krista West. I am the owner and designer of Avlea Folk Embroidery. For those of you who are just tuning in, you can see that a lot of these fabrics behind me are not embroidery fabrics. These are actually Greek Orthodox liturgical vestment fabrics. And we're actually going to talk about some of those today in conjunction with embroideries. And that's because for 25 years, I have actually worked as a Greek Orthodox liturgical tailor. So I make church vestments and things like that. And that's actually how I got into embroidery. If you want to know more on that, watch the video titled Why Embroidery. And so I have a lot to draw on today that's not just embroidery. So my websites are Avlea Folk Embroidery is www.av, as in Victor, lea.life. Story there, sidebar, .com was like a $400 domain name. So when I first got the website, I just chose the $10 domain name. So that's why I have the weird extension. Then the other, my other vestment website is www.kwvestments.com. Or you can just Google Greek Orthodox vestments and I'll be probably the first thing that pops up. So, and then I'm on Instagram. I'm actually currently in the middle of my 90-day daily post Instagram challenge, except Sundays, because I'm not posting on Sundays because, I need a day to just recover. And that has been so much fun. Wow, that's just been a total surprise to me how much I'm enjoying that and how much it's really making me think about my own creative process. So that's been really fun to follow. Kind of big news this week that I was really excited about. Did anyone happen to notice that I think it was Monday, Love Crafts actually featured one of my designs in their post, which is very exciting because they're now selling all of my designs. And then you can also find me on Etsy. On Etsy, I'm at Avlea Folk Embroidery. Right now on both Etsy and at avlea.life, we are, let's see, the July special is 25% off all download patterns. People, it's a steal. It means you can get most of my regular patterns as PDF downloads for $7.50 after the discount. So it's a really great way to go. And then I also offer free shipping both at Etsy and Avlea because I just didn't want you to have to worry about that or think about it. So now to launch in today, we're going to talk about floral designs and motifs in Mediterranean textiles. We're doing this today because I just released a new design yesterday called Avlea Table Runner. You can say Avanthea if you want, but in Greek we say Avlea. And Avlea just means little flowers. And this is the table runner. Whoopsie, here, let me hold it up like this. This is the design I just released. It's got a really fabulous floral motif. I love this one. It's almost like these unique, almost like cornflowers coming out of these heart-shaped vases. Now, the heart, so let's start a little bit with what we in 21st century America call a heart shape. I read the most fascinating academic paper on this a couple of years ago when I was doing some research into liturgical vestments. And the current thinking is that the shape that we call the heart is actually in the Byzantine Empire was considered to be a rose. And that's because if you were to take a rose, if you were to take one of these roses, when they're just a bud and you cut them in half, it looks like a heart shape. So that's kind of the art historical thinking behind that. So I think it's very interesting because I think we as human beings are very drawn to that particular shape. And a lot of times in America, there's a lot of people who that heart shape is very sentimental and doesn't always have the best association. I'd probably say that for people like my age and younger, that, you know, I would like never have been caught dead in heart jewelry, like in my 30s, you know. So for some of us, that heart shape has this very sentimental connection. And for me, I was able to sort of let that layer go when I really understood it to be a much more historic design, and that it really was referencing a rose. So that's kind of the first thing. And then you'll also notice one of the other things we're going to talk about too is in this design, there are these little serrated, we can call these carnations. They're not totally like a carnation shape, but a serrated flower or a serrated leaf is just something that has a jaggedy edge. Okay, so that serration just means like zigzaggy or jaggedy. And that is really, really common in ancient textiles. So let's start just jumping in and talking about different textiles and looking at their motifs and their colors and their floral designs particularly. So that's the Avlea table runner. Interestingly enough, one of the very first designs that I did was the one we call Mediterranean floral table runner, which I absolutely wish I would have chosen a more creative name for now. But this design is a really interesting hybrid of a very sort of very sort of Byzantine feel here with very Italianate influences here. These sort of big overblown flowers, big leaves, everything big. Think big peonies, you know, flowers at full bloom, very Italianate influence. Now, a lot of what I'm going to say is really just going to barely scratch the surface of art history, but it's kind of a fun place just to begin. And this is a very broad generalization, but generally speaking, things that are much more sort of overblown and these big, huge designs are of an Italianate influence. And the reason you see them in Greek and Mediterranean textiles is because there was this whole interchange between the Venetian world and the Byzantine world. And people were trading things. And, you know, there was fashion then, as there is fashion now. And it might be that, like, you were living in Constantinople and, you know, you'd seen, like, stylized stuff, and that had kind of been your norm. And then, you know, some ship arrives from Venice, and they've got all this new stuff. And it's got, like, these amazing overblown flowers, and you'd never seen anything like that before. And you're like, wow, that is so cool. And then that gets taken in to sort of the Byzantine artistic climate, and it melds in and mixes with other things. And so we see a lot of that in Mediterranean textiles, these multiple influences, because kind of from where we're standing at our point in history, it's very easy for us to kind of, what shall we say, stand on our our little internet soapbox and say, well, we have access to the entire world like nobody ever did in history. Yes, that's probably really true. But you have to remember the importance of trade in the ancient world. People were on ships, people were going places, people were taking new things to new places. So even though someone might be living on, like, say, a remote island in Greece, they would still see new stuff. There'd be a wealthy family on the island who owned boats or maybe was a trader or these sorts of things. So there is this huge amount of interplay of designs in the Mediterranean world, which makes it very vibrant. You see other designs from Asia Minor. You see things that actually started out like almost as like carpet designs, like from Persia, that very much come into this. And another example of that, like for example, this is a really good example of that stylized flower. So like for example, let me see if I can put this one up to the camera, right? This is our Byzantine meander. Now that is a very classic Byzantine design. It's got the meander. You can see the echoes of Roman tile work in that meander design, the very sharp outlining. For those of you who do Holbein or black work, it even has a little bit of that feel because of all the black work, the black outlining. But this is a very stylized flower. It's got a central flower, and then it's basically got these little leaves coming out of either side. Very repetitive, very geometric in its feel. So when we talk about something being stylized, we tend to think of it as being having a little bit more geometry. If it's a leaf, instead of being like a very like the kind of leaf you just see in a photograph, like a nature picture on Instagram, it wouldn't be like that. It wouldn't be realistic like that. It'd be stylized. It'd be turned into almost like a grid or a pattern. And that's part of why these designs work so well in counted thread work. Counted thread work, because it is a grid system, works extremely well for stylized designs. So moving along, let's talk about this. Oh, actually, let's see here. Yes, actually, I'm going to talk about something really quick about that whole Italianate stylized overblown. Oh, and for those of you who have mentioned that when I move away from the camera, you can't hear me, don't worry. I'm picking out a lavalier USB mic soon. Oh, but I have to find a wireless one because the cord gets in my way when I'm trying to like record videos. So anyways, this is a truly stunning liturgical brocade. It's the Canterbury brocade. I source it from La Lame in New York, which sells some real metal brocades. It is very heavy. A set of vestments made out of 4 yards of this weighs about 12 to 15 pounds. So it's very heavy. But you can see this idea of a vase with these big overblown flowers. And then you've got actually a secondary motif here, which is another vase. So not one, but 2 vases in this design. Plus very intense coloration, gold background, but red and coral and pink and garnet colored flowers over this. But this floral design, this is a classically Italianate kind of Venetian influenced floral design. Let me show you the same design in a different color to show you how the design jumps out when it's in a different color. That's kind of fun. I have to unbury it here. Whoop. I put it here a minute ago. Okay, so here's the same fabric, but it's done in a white background with red and blue accents. And you can see that one here. And now, and I'm not doing a very good job of this bolt, showing you on this bolt, there is that same big floral motif, but now it jumps out even more because of the white background. And the gold on this is actually the same gold threads, but they look a little more what we call miffin, or more towards the platinum end of the spectrum. Not platinum per se, but a little more silvered. They look that way because they're against a white background. And in this one, it's got this really cool effect where all the accenting flowers are done in blue. This is a really, really beautiful design. I actually end up working on a lot of liturgical orders, a lot of vestments that are of this very large floral repeat style. I'll show you a couple more. Here's another one. This is the Kefalonia brocade. This is from Greece. Really beautiful. You can see in this one, its flowers are a little bit more, they're still pretty overblown, definitely like an Italianate influence, but this one has a very decided liturgical symbolical overlay with the wheat sheaves, because the wheat sheaves represent the bread used in communion. And so this one is very liturgical without ever like having a cross on it. And actually I get asked that question a lot. People will say, well, why are people using fabrics that have flowers all over them for church vestments? Now, that's actually really interesting. So let me grab one more fabric though to explain that. Here's another one. This is another big one. Sorry, these are all really heavy fabrics. So this one is a beautiful brocade. This is called ochred, and it has these beautiful sprays here that are really Italianate, very overblown roses, but an interesting twist on this one. This vase here has an almost Egyptian feel to it, and the floral work in here is very reminiscent of Persian carpets. This has got a very Indian Persian feel to it. It's a little different in feel than, say, the bigger, more sort of Venetian influenced. I mean, this definitely is kind of in that same overall category, but when you dig a little deeper into the motif, you can see that there's design variances. And then we also notice here, look at these little stylized flowers here. That's an interesting mix here because we have the big overblown kind of more modern Renaissance-y flower, but we have this stylized here. And then we have these this vine work here. Again, very reminiscent of Persian and even some Chinese carpets, but more Persian, really. So why do people use all the flowers in Greek Orthodox vestments? Sorry, and I always end up with like threads like all over me. And that is because there's this understanding in the Greek Orthodox Church that you use your best for the best. So you use your very best vestments. And at many times in history, these were the finest fabrics that you could get. So it was much more important to clergy and parishes over the last number of centuries that they were putting something beautiful in their churches, as opposed to the more modern kind of thinking in which something is right, okay? That's a really important aesthetic question to be asking, especially when you're talking about Mediterranean textiles. The question that would have been asked historically was not, is it right? Like, does it have a cross on it, or does it have the exact right symbology? It was, is it beautiful? So the concept of beauty and something being beautiful, and therefore its beauty was what made it most appropriate for being brought into a liturgical setting. That's the most ancient approach to vestments. And so interestingly enough, in Manathos in Greece, for those of you who are not aware of Manathos, it's one of the largest monastic centers in the world. And it has been a monastic center for centuries and centuries and centuries. And the monks who live there live very ascetical lives. They stick to a very basic diet. They eat no meat. They have a very, very restrained diet. In fact, actually, a number of medical studies have been done on Manathos because it's a really careful study of a group of people who have been eating the same way for a number of years. And in their personal lives, they live lives of prayer, and they have, midnight services. They're up in the middle of the night. It's very, very restrained in their lifestyle. But it is the place where you will see some of the most over-the-top vestments and vestment fabrics in the world. Every once in a while, clients will send me pictures like, I was on Manathos and I saw this procession, and there's literally 20 monks in these enormous, like elaborate floral vestments. And that's because those are considered the most beautiful. And really, when you see that, I mean, I do work on a lot of fabrics that have a nice basic cross motif in them. There's a lot of times that those are really like the appropriate thing. But when you see an entire, say, Greek Orthodox liturgy, and there is all of these vestments with all these floral designs with the metal thread glinting and everything, it's eye-popping. It's really quite a scene. It's beautiful. So this idea of using flowers in the liturgy is very, very common. And in fact, actually, funny story. I had a client a number of years ago, and he was this very, he wouldn't mind me describing him this way. He was very swarthy. He's a very swarthy guy, and he was just a guy's guy. And, but he loved floral vestments, and he would always go for the most flowery, the most over-the-top vestments. And one time actually said to me, I'm man enough to wear flowers. And I just loved that. I thought that was great because it isn't about what the flowers say about you. It's like about what the flowers like say in context, which I just really loved that. So anyways, so let's get back to embroidery now that we've talked a little bit about that. So you can imagine a world back in like, say, the 1700s in the Greek islands, and people are seeing these kind of Venetian brocades in their liturgy. They're seeing them when they go to church. They may be seeing them on Venetian trading ships coming in. They may be even using small amounts of them in their folk costumes, incorporating small bits of them as they could afford them, because these would have been phenomenally expensive. I mean, even today, an entire set of vestments made out of one of these fabrics is about $1,700 because there's just, these are very expensive. Some of these are as much as like $250 a yard. So when I'm working on a set like this, it's not uncommon for me to have $1,000 worth of fabric actually laid out on my table, which is a little intimidating, I have to admit. So we use my dad's old adage, and we always measure twice, cut once on those. Usually I measure like 3 or 4 times and then cut once. But so coming back to embroidery, you can imagine a world in which we have all these amazing, beautiful Venetian designs, brocades coming in with these different influences from Persian, things like that. And it translates into the embroidery. And so they're doing designs like this. This one's really interesting. This is the Zoe border design. And this is kind of, again, a hybrid design. You've got this very Byzantine, very stylized feel, with the 8-pointed star. That's called actually an octagram, is what that's called. But then you've got little wheat sheaves coming out, and you've got little crosslet flowers and different things like that happening. And then a whole bunch more little crosslet flowers here, and you've got more flowers down here. And then you've got this really unique shape, which I still am not 100% certain what it's called, but it's very distinctive. It has a very historic kind of almost pre-Christian feel to it in my mind. But then you got little flowers in here, and then you've got little leaves pointing there, and then little things that could be a little sunburst, but also feel like a flower. Very stylized. Then, see, what else have I not talked about? Oh, because at the same time that women are embroidering designs like this, say in the Greek islands, okay, they're also embroidering designs like this. Now, this I'm very excited to share with you today. I actually, thank you tax return, I finally purchased my own copy of Wace and Dawkins 2-volume set Mediterranean and Near Eastern embroideries of the collection of Mrs. F.H. Cook. It's a very important work in Greek embroidery. It was published in 1935, and there were only 235 copies made, I believe, in the world. So I've been searching for a long time to find an affordably priced copy. Believe me, I have no idea how expensive this little booklet set can get. But it's amazing because it has 135 full color plates of these embroideries. So here we see an awesome pomegranate design. Now this is very stylized. This is actually from, I think, a bed cover. And if I remember right, it's from Epirus. Oh, sorry, Ionian Islands, 17th century. But this you can see very interesting because we have that very stylized look and a really simple color palette. Like this design is basically blue and red and green and white. And the coloration is all really similar. Like the values of the colors are very similar. It doesn't have the effect of shading. It doesn't have the effect of shadowing. It's just a straight up stylized design. Now, that's also quite common in this type of embroidery work in Mediterranean textiles. That's another thing that you can see. I'm going to see if I can find another one for you in here. Now, occasionally, you see things getting even more stylized, and this you'll see more through Asia Minor. Now here, you have a bunch of like leaves and things like that, and they're more forming sort of an all-over pattern than, say, a whole artistic tableau, if you want to call it that. So sometimes we'll see floral designs used like we would think of them in nature, like a spray. You know, you have a vase of roses, you know, basically a stem with flowers coming out of them, and a vase, okay? And we do see that all the time. We see things like this, again, vase, flowers coming out of it, other little sprays mixed in, but the central motif tends to be vase with flowers. But then we have this whole category of things where the flower becomes very stylized or the leaf becomes stylized and it becomes kind of the design motif in its own right. The other group, oh, yay, I have one right here. And that group, some of those groups where we talk about the leaves as opposed to just where basically the leaf becomes its own floral design unit, we could say, is called the platophilo. It's the broadleaf design. This is really common in Greek embroidery textiles, and it was used in a lot of different ways. It was used sometimes to make these bed tents. I think we talked about that in the last episode, but these bed curtains and these bed tents would have these leaves done, let's see, vertically all the way down in these bands. Really cool geometric feel. So it's really definitely very stylized. Now we're kind of going all the way to the other end of the spectrum. We're moving away from, like, say, Venetian designs and things like that over to the stylized designs. Very, very common. Oh, in fact, actually, oh, yay, maybe there's a full color picture, but here we go. This is black and white, but it gives you an idea of what I'm talking about. This is how they would have been done, is vertically in a great big curtain like that. Okay? So they would have also been used as borders. So sometimes, actually right now, I'm in this whole design space creatively right now, where I discovered the Victoria and Albert Museum Search the Collections button. Oh, dangerous. I could literally lose myself there for days. And so I have been doing a lot of upcoming designs that are based on cushion and bed tent borders. And a lot of those feature either very strong geometrics, things like the octograms, or sometimes you'll see the like Byzantine heart rose. But a lot of them have tons of vine work with flowers, I was actually working on one yesterday. It's really giving me fits because it is a unidirectional design, which means I can't easily make a corner for it, and I can't really tip it. I can only like mirror it one way or the other. So, but it's almost got like this. I looked at it and thought, oh, what's an Art Deco design doing in this collection? Then I had to look closer, and it was actually from the 17th century and the Ionian Islands, but it totally reads Art Deco. If I showed it to you, which I should have had it ready to show to you, you would totally say, oh, that's Art Deco, but it's not. It's actually 17th century. And those designs will feature like the vine work, but then usually a break in the vine work to create the idea of a shadow effect, which are really cool too. Let me see if I can find any more in this one. Nope, now we're into Noxo stuff. Oh, actually, here's an awesome bed tent curtain one. This shows you the plateau philo, the broadleaf, but here it's combined with a whole riot of like floral designs and birds and figures and all sorts of stuff. And then also combined with the little geometric border. So just to kind of end up, let's finish up by talking a little bit about those little geometric borders. Because one of the things that's really interesting to me that I've noticed as I've been designing Mediterranean designs and studying historic ones is that you often have a very floral design grounded by a very geometric border. It's pretty much like, it's super common. And there's just something about that I find really compelling. And I think that actually what it is I think that it keeps the floral design from feeling too sentimental and too overblown. It really, those little borders, I actually can say in a lot of my designs, I spend more time fussing with that little border than I do the actual big design, because you have to like line them all up and get the repeats have to be just right, and they have to turn the corners correctly, and they're really kind of challenging. But when you get it right, they completely set off the design. And they work like this frame that sort of keeps that overblown, kind of like super floral look very much in check. There's like this kind of, dare I say, yin and yang, but it's got this kind of, this feel of like, oh, we're grounded. Got this nice border. Great. You can do all the big, overblown peonies and the roses and the carnations, whatever, but it's going to be in this little, area. And there's something about that artistically that really works. I don't really know why, but it just does. And so I find the little borders really compelling. So we've talked a lot today about floral designs in Mediterranean textiles, both liturgical and embroidery. And I think that's a really good place to stop for today. As I finish, I just want to remind you all of my places you can find me. So you can find me on Instagram at Krista M. West. You can subscribe to me on YouTube. Thank you. Thank you to everyone that has been subscribing. That is really, really helpful. As a small business owner, those things are really important for getting the word out about my designs, and especially with sort of the economic impact going on right now due to COVID, I am really grateful. We are at the point, we are very grateful for every order that comes in. And so I just want to thank everyone who is taking the time to place an order or subscribe to me on YouTube or those sorts of things. And then you can see my work at www.avlea.life. That's AVLEA.life. Or if you want to see more of the liturgical stuff, it's at www.kwvestments.com. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. Thank you.